Guest Nasi is Advocate Dumisani Zimbabwe to speak on an issue that has been topical over the last couple of months or so. An issue yokuti vanhu vakawanda, we know kuti muZimbabwe mune macycles ekuti panoitika chinhu tese totomboita ma-experts panguva iyoyo, saka zvinezvi tine ma-legal experts akawanda but tiri kumisleadana nezvakawanda. That's why Advocate Zimbabwe is here today kuti vabatsirane nesu. Allow me to welcome Advocate Zimbabwe mungaombera henyu vachiuya.
I'm pleased to be speaking before you today. We are discussing, it's not a lecture, it's a discussion on pertinent issues which involve governance. Why is it important? Governance is very important because it affects your everyday life. As an introductory part of this lecture, this bill introduces a set of constructive reforms that, taken together, reinforce constitutional governance, strengthen democratic structures, clarify institutional mandates, and harmonize Zimbabwe's constitutional order with tested and successful practice in other progressive jurisdictions. So I'll take an approach whereby I'll address every clause and then explain each and every clause. Okay. So the first clause, there are quite a number of them. There are about 18 clauses. So the first clause pertains to the title. I think everyone is clear on that. It's the Amendment Bill number 3, which is the title. The second clause, which is clause number 2, establishes a parliamentary method for selecting the president. So on this aspect, I just want to demystify certain issues. I've seen social media and people making different comments. Yes, it's not taking away one man, one vote. Maybe to give you a historical background, in 1980, the Prime Minister who was elected then was Robert Mugabe, was elected by this same parliamentary method, whereby a party which has garnered more MPs in parliament would eventually select the prime minister or government. So this is the same system which is being reintroduced. Why? Why is it important to have this system? It's very important given the personal circumstances of Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is a developing country, and to then have elections for councillors, to then have elections for members of parliament, and the presidential election is a burden to the fiscus. It means we are spending so much money, whereas we can just elect the president through members of parliament. And also, to give you maybe, I think we all understand, it's a historical fact. There's been disputes surrounding the presidential election, where other parties to the election have disputed the results. So I think, in my own opinion, it is rather better to have MPs then vote for the president. It is more transparent and it avoids toxic politics. And also, I want to also to give you, like in other jurisdictions, representative democracy actually work. In the United Kingdom, which is one of, in my own respective view, one of the best democracies in the world, they actually use the parliamentary system to then elect the equivalence of the president in the UK is the prime minister. He uses executive power. So the current prime minister is Starmer. So Starmer is from the Labour Party. So what then happens? So when the British public are voting, they vote for a particular MP. So they know if you want a prime minister coming from the Labour Party, you then vote for a Labour MP. And that Labour MP eventually votes for your respective leader, which you would want. So the argument that this system is going to take away the public to then vote for the president is, to me, it's rather ridiculous. Moving on, I will address clause 3, 7, and 8 together because they speak to the same effect. They intend to eliminate election mode toxicity and allow sufficient time for project implementation while promoting stability. These clauses aim to substitute the current 5-year term with a 7-year term as provided in Section 95, Section 143, and Section 158 of the Constitution. So I think this is where all manner of noise and dust arises. So, okay, I would want to speak to the issue where other people are saying constitutionally you require a referendum to then amend the aforesaid section. So, technically, in terms of the Constitution, a minimum for a term is 3 years. A term limit, a minimum term limit in terms of the Constitution is 3 years. So, this amendment attempts to change the election cycle, which was scheduled in 2028 to 2030. And that change of election cycle is below 3 years, which is the stipulated minimum period of an election term. So, this is not an election, a term extension, but rather a change of election cycle. Okay. So, it does not affect Section 328 of the Constitution, which requires a referendum. Okay. So, like what I have mentioned before, it is important that we have 7-year term limit. 7 years terms. Why? You see, like what I have alluded before, Zimbabwe is a developing country. We have what I would say unique conditions and circumstances as we face. And the Constitution itself, it's a living document and it is a transformative document. What that means, it must serve the needs of the people. And the law is a social engineering tool which is meant to save us, not the other way around. The tail can never wag the dog, but the dog wags the tail. So, what I'm trying to say, there are certain projects which require more time. There are certain problems which are systematic and which are unique to Zimbabwe, which require more time for particularly the president, the members of parliament, our councillors, to address those issues. I would want to, this is not just found in Zimbabwe. I would give an example of Rwanda. Rwanda in 1994, this was a country which had experienced genocide. Over 500,000 people died in Rwanda due to the genocide there. And also infrastructure had been destroyed and all problems caused by war. But Rwanda has managed to transform its economy into one of the best in sub-Saharan Africa. Why? They have, to me, according to me, they have 7-year term limits. This actually allows them to focus more on economic development rather than fighting. And, it's like we are always in an election mode. We are always anticipating to have an election. And also, like, the issue regarding to the fixers, we don't have money to have elections every 5 years. It's costly. It's very costly. We need to admit that these are harsh realities which Zimbabwe finds itself in. It's very costly to us have election over 5 years without the progress, without tangible results. I think it is pertinent to give whoever is in office the time and opportunity to make a difference to the Zimbabwean people. So on that regard, I think it's pertinent that these sections be amended. And then I'll move on to clause 4. Clause 4, this clause provides for the deletion of the words first before vice president. This concept was repealed by Constitutional Amendment number 2. So when we made the Constitutional Amendment number 2, which is already sailed through, which is actually law, we attempted to address this issue, but there was an issue where the word first vice president was not deleted, because in terms of the Constitution, both vice president are at par. So there is no first vice president and no second vice president. There's just vice president of the Republic of Zimbabwe. Yes. I think that one is very clear. And then clause 5. Clause 5 pertains, this clause attempts to remove the words High Court and replace them with Supreme Court, since the Attorney General must be qualified for appointment as a judge of the Supreme Court. So basically, this issue pertains to the office of Attorney General. I think maybe we all know what the Attorney General does, but I'll just explain. The Attorney General is rather the legal practitioner for government. The Attorney General advises government on all legal issues. The Attorney General attends cabinet meetings and give directions as far as the law pertains. So it is very also important that person, their qualifications are elevated to that of a Supreme Court judge. Why? Because we need competence. We need a person with the high skill to then actually give proper and quality advice, legal advice to government. So I think that one is very clear. Then we will address clause 6. Clause 6, the provision allows the president to appoint 10 senators, raising the total number of senators to 90. The amendment aims to bring a broader technical expertise, enhance parliamentary oversight, expand the pool of potential ministers, build public confidence, and help reduce political and social divisions. So this one pertains to senators. Senate is a house of parliament. So why is it important then that the president must have the right to then appoint 10 more senators? We need people who are technical in certain ministries. For example, I would give you the Minister of Finance. The current Minister of Finance is Professor Mtuli. He's a professor in economics. So given the complexity of that particular ministry, you see it's very important to have someone who then understands economics, so that we have quality leadership in technical branches of government. And also, I would also give maybe the Minister of Health, where particularly in my view, you need someone who's a medical practitioner or who has practiced medicine in Zimbabwe, then to understand our health system and also to deliver, better health to the populace of Zimbabwe. So also, as you are aware in terms of the Constitution, Parliament is oversight over the executive. So it means the Parliament should scrutinize government policy. So as you know, if you watch on television, you see ministers, they go to Parliament, either to the lower house, which is House of National Assembly, and the Senate, which is the upper house, where they answer questions. They are asked questions about government policy and what they are doing in their respective ministries. So you would need someone who is also technical to then pose technical questions to various ministries. For example, like the Minister of Finance, you will probably need a senator who is acquainted to that particular field to then pose serious questions to that particular minister. So I'm saying maybe perhaps it's the Minister of Justice. You also need a lawyer, okay? Perhaps maybe we have few lawyers who have been elected as senators. So then the president goes on to say, I've appointed so and so, who is a legal practitioner, to be a senator. So when it's during a question and answer session, we see that particular senator asking, legal question to the Minister of Justice. Okay? And also, in Parliament, they have debates. They conduct debates. Perhaps maybe it's on legislation. So you need people who are technical in various certain special fields to give quality debate to Parliament. We need to be entertained to know that our leaders, they know what they are doing and they have respective knowledge of their respective disciplines and fields. And also, moving on, on clause 6, it's also important that it's not only technical people who can be appointed among the 10 senators. It might be people from minority groups, persons with disabilities can also be appointed as a senator to represent that minority group. With minority societies, those who have been marginalized. For example, I can give you the Kalangas. You might have the president appointing someone so that that particular society is not left out in decision making. Okay, so I'll jump to clause 9. I've already addressed clause 8. Clause 9. This clause provides for the creation of Zimbabwe Electoral Delimitation Commission. It addresses the concerns about ZEC's dual role in drawing electoral boundaries and promotes good governance and institutional integrity. So the previous election, we had issues, people challenging how ZEC came up with delimitation boundaries. Perhaps maybe I should then clarify what is delimitation boundaries. So we have constituents in Zimbabwe. For example, I come from Masvingo urban constituents. This constituents is drawn under the current framework is drawn by Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. So this section attempts to then create a new and independent commission which comes up with these boundaries. Why is it important to have a specialized commission which deals with these issues? I think it's very important because ZEC is overwhelmed. It has a lot in its plate, and also you would need people who are specialized, who are technical, who can then come up with proper and better boundaries. And we can actually avoid some of these issues where people saying, no, this boundary is not appropriate. We are having these challenges because we have experts who can do that job, and they have all the time to then address those issues. And then ZEC also has plentiful time then to address the conduct of elections and so on. So I think that one is clear. Let's move on to clause 10. This clause deletes the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, substitute with the Zimbabwe Electoral Delimitation Commission as the function for the delimitation of boundaries is now within the ambit of the Zimbabwe Delimitation Commission. I think it pertains also to clause 9, which we were dealing with. So yeah, we can skip to clause 11. This clause deletes the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission and substitute it with the Zimbabwe Electoral Delimitation Commission wherever it appears. So the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission appears in so many sections within the constitution when it pertains to delimitation of boundaries. So this clause basically tries to then address that. And then we move on to clause 12. This clause transfers the responsibility for registering voters, compiling the voters roll and maintaining the voters roll and registers from the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission to the Registrar General. The rationale ensures efficiency since the registrar is the custodian of these records. Under the current framework, Zimbabwe Electoral Commission is responsible for the maintenance and custodian of the voters roll. The voters roll is essentially a list of registered voters. So, for example, we are saying in Masvingo South constituents, these are the list of the people who are registered and eligible to vote. Okay. So why is it important to transfer this role to the Registrar General? The Registrar General is responsible for registering, in terms of the law, is responsible for registering all births in Zimbabwe and also to register all deaths in Zimbabwe. So it is very, crucial that they maintain the voters roll because they have the up-to-date information which pertains to who is a citizen of Zimbabwe, who is eligible to vote, who has died and who has been born, who has attained 18 years of age. Yes. So it is actually more efficient that they handle the voters roll. In past, I'm a fanatic of election petition cases. There's the one in 2018 by Nelson Chamisa versus the current president, and there's the one between the former Prime Minister Morgan Tsvangirai versus the late former President Robert Mugabe. All these cases, issues of ghost voters were raised. So I think it is actually important that the Registrar General knows who died, and that information can be easily updated to the voters by the Registrar General. I think that is clear. I will then move to clause 13. This clause provides for the Constitutional Court to hear any other matter on point of law of public importance. Currently, the Constitutional Court is only permitted to hear cases related to constitutional matters. So, this one pertains to the hierarchy of courts. Currently, the Supreme Court is the final court as far as non-constitutional matters are concerned, but it doesn't make sense then to say the Constitutional Court is the apex court when it cannot decide or when it cannot give finality to certain non-constitutional matters, such as a point of law, where you are not saying that we have material disputes of facts, but we have disagreements on what the law says. So I think it makes more sense to then say the apex court must have a final say on that issue. So I think that one is very clear as far as this clause is concerned. And let's move on to clause 14. This clause repeals section 180, subsection 4, and subsection 4A, and subsection 5, and substitute it with appointment of judges after consulting the Judicial Service Commission. So under the current framework, there are public interviews which are conducted by the Judicial Service Commission. So this clause attempts to then say the Judicial Service Commission must just then make recommendations to the president without public interviews. Why is it important? I think it's like what I've alluded to before. It pertains to the physicals. It is actually, we are taking more of taxpayers' money to conduct public interviews, which could easily be done by the Judicial Service Commission privately, because in any case, the interviews are conducted by Judicial Service Commission, who then make the recommendations without input from the public, because they are the experts. They know who is a good judge. They know the qualities and characteristics of a good judge. Yes. So it is, let's leave the experts to then deal with their field, and also our appointed official who then gives the final say. After all, the president is elected by us. So we do have confidence in the president that his selection of a judge is in the best interest of the nation. Yes. Moving on, our address clause 15. This clause amends section 212, the functions of defense forces of the Constitution, by deleting the words "to uphold this Constitution" and substituting them with "in accordance with the Constitution." The amendment is intended to reinforce provisions of section 213 and 214 of the Constitution. The Zimbabwe Defense Forces are a creature of statute and law. They are created by the Constitution, so it is more, efficient, and makes more sense that they act in accordance with the Constitution, which means they cannot act outer vires the Constitution. They cannot act out of the bounds of the Constitution. They must be subservient to the Constitution. So I think that one is clear. And then clause 16, this clause proposes repealing section 239, the paragraph C to paragraph E, so that the functions can be reassigned to the Registrar General, in section 239, paragraph F, so that its functions is transferred to the Zimbabwe Electoral Delimitation Commission. We've already discussed these issues. It pertains to functions of maintaining the voters' roll, which is transferred from Zimbabwe Electoral Commission to the Registrar General, and also the issue to do with delimitation, which is transferred from ZEC to the Delimitation Commission. Yes. Moving on, clause 17. This clause repeals part 4 of chapter 12 of the Constitution, which establishes the Zimbabwe Gender Commission. Its function will be transferred to the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission, since the Human Rights Commission is already mandated to protect all human rights, including those that are currently under the purview of the Zimbabwe Gender Commission. So basically, here, what's being said is that gender rights are also human rights. So the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission is capacity, institutional capacity, to handle this issue, and also pertaining to the fiscus. As you might be aware, commissioners of independent commissions are equivalent to cabinet ministers. So it's cumbersome on the burden of taxpayers' money to have two commissions which deal with the same matters. The Human Rights Commission can still deal with gender issues. Yes, so it is in the interest of good governance that we just have a singular commission which deals with human rights. I do understand that this clause has qualms, particularly with women, but rest assured, women rights are still pertinent and they are still upholded, enforced, and respected by the Constitution, by independent commissions and various government departments. Yes. So there must not be any conflation or confusion as far as the commitment to women's rights is concerned. Okay. So clause 18 also speaks to the same issue. It basically says the Zimbabwe Gender Commission function under the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission. And then moving on, we have clause 19. This clause removes the requirement for the president to appoint the prosecutor general on the advice of the Judicial Service Commission. As such, an arrangement creates a potential conflict of interest where the commission recommends a candidate for appointment. So, basically, in terms of the Constitution, there's a separation between the Judicial Service Commission and the National Prosecuting Authority. So, to have the Judicial Service Commission, then recommend to the President an appropriate candidate for the Prosecutor General would actually be a conflict of interest, because these commissions, they must operate independent from each other. So if you have the other commission then proposing who should head the other commission, its independence is then compromised. So I think that section then attempts to correct that anomaly. The Prosecutor General should be independent from the Judicial Service Commission. This section then attempts to rectify that anomaly. Moving on, clause 20. This clause repeals section 281, subsection 2. It violates the political rights of traditional leaders. Their code of conduct shall be provided in an act of parliament. So, there is no future without the past. We need also to then look to the historical background of Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is a republic which was born out of a liberation struggle. So during the liberation struggle, traditional leaders were at the forefront of the liberation struggle. Then after that, they've delivered the independence we all enjoy today. We then say they don't have a right to take part into active politics. I think that's regrettable and unforgivable, given their immense contribution to the liberation struggle. And also, it does not affect their impartial discharge of their role as community leaders, as arbitrators or judicial officers of local and customary law courts. They will still be subjected to that same level of political impartiality as far as their office of being a traditional leader is concerned. But we cannot then take away their right to participate in politics. They are also human beings. They also formulate political opinions. We cannot then subject them to silence. And I think it's fair enough that they also then take part into politics. Moving on, clause 21. This clause repeals part 6 of the of Chapter 12 of the Constitution, which pertains to the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission. As you all know, Zimbabwe is a peaceful, loving country, which is currently stable, and to then subject the taxpayers' money to have this commission, which has been abrogated by disuse. It is, it does not make good sense. It's not in the interest of good governance, which is also one of our founding values as a nation, that we must have good governance. And the Reconciliation and Peace Commission has already served its purpose. And after all, there are other channels where if there is an issue which pertains to national reconciliation and peace, they can be addressed. So yeah, it's actually alleviating the burden on taxpayers' money, and perhaps maybe that money can be channeled to do other social amenities, maybe job creation, and so forth. So I've come to the end of the lecture. Maybe.
All right. Thank you, Advocate, for a very insightful presentation. I picked up on a number of issues myself that I perhaps had no clarity over. I think Pandayan's when you kept 3, I'm speaking in my personal capacity. I always thought about it seemed to revolve, my debate seemed to revolve around term extension from 5 years to 7 years, and then selection of the president from by parliamentarians. So but now I'm actually surprised there are more than 20 clauses are proposed. So I think we are running the risk of missing out on real issues that are also coming out. Like if you look at clause 20 there, traditional leaders, political affiliated power. I think it does have a lot of bearing on my elections edu and how but all the same, I think let me open the floor for reactions, questions and contributions. I know Jubilee Sibanda had a question that he posed. Jubes posed a question earlier. I think this is the time Yogutitingedichi Vunza so that our legal bed here can address. Ngaona ingwe mic.
Thank you very much. But I think most of my questions have been answered already, because when I walked in, I had no idea. I had a rough idea actually about what CAPE 3 is, but its implications, what then do we get to, how do we benefit as citizens of Zimbabwe? If we are to vote for an MP who then selects the president, what then do we stand to benefit? I heard he mentioned about, he talked about the fiscus, to say if we are to change our election cycles, then we get to serve on fiscus. I don't know, maybe it's something that we can debate about in this room. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that question there. I think I'll take 2 more reactions. At least cover 3, then we give a chance to address Kuna Advocate Edu Anditika. You spoke there about, I think it's a very interesting question, and obviously Atauro from an innovator, answer what do we benefit? What's in it for us? Those are our weapons. If I got you right, and it. All right, it's okay. Second reaction.
Thank you very much, Advocate Simbwa. My name is Andrew Gwaba. I want to first congratulate GZU for implementing Section 20, subsection 1, paragraph A to E of the country constitution, by having one of our own being a panelist, being a facilitator of this historic program that is not only going to shape our legal fraternity, but is going to shape us for generations. That is my first compliment. Now, let me go to the questions. You were talking of meritocracy, Advocate, where you mentioned Honorable Minister, Professor Mtuli Ngube. And I would wish also to submit the same should also happen even when it comes to other appointments, be they in the Judicial Service Commission, be they elsewhere. I am speaking in my own personal capacity. And also let me also go to the issue of Human Rights Commission. I think last time when we have a public lecture at this institution, we as people who are passionate about the constitution, about the governance of our country, we were talking about decentralization of Human Rights Commission. Because if you check, it is in 6 out of 10 provinces, which means there's a gap that needs to be filled. So now, them becoming a conglomerate, will it going to address the challenges of those districts or provinces that have not been covered? I'm talking from a demographic and geographic position, cognizant of the fact that Zimbabwe's population is 67% rural, the rest is urban. This is where I'm coming from. Number two, you also spoke about the Registrar General taking other responsibilities, which we appreciate and which we firmly believe that it will solve a lot of issues. I think for now, those are the submissions that I have. Thank you very much for the time.
All right. I think tinamborambidzwa kuomberera maoko kune vari kubvunza ma-questions handitika. All right, so I'd asked for 3 reactions, but then Kwazo, I think I was at 4 because he had a number of contributions. So we're going to allow Advocate Zimbabwe to answer. One question yavunzwa yekuti kwanzi, what's in it for us? And the general, oh, there's another reaction. All right, let me take one more reaction before we go. Sorry? First question, yeah. All right, okay. And the first question, I think we're going to give you another chance. But the long and the short of what you were saying was that you are saying everything else having been said and done by Cap 3, and what's in it for us as the general public? What's in it for us as a people, if I got you right? And that's what is confirmed. Are you clear on that one now? Is it not clear? All right. So I think that's the first question there. I was baranye fiscus with answer ruti mimi roseva fiscus by presentation. It is is it then redirected to other projects, and who then says my priorities yava edition yangu you. And then there was a question meritocracy, where there was a mention of Professor Mtuli Ncube, obviously being in his position through merit. I'm not sure, but Ndanzwa Sokuti Rabajanzi, the same standard should be extended to other commissions. And then the Gender Commission deletion, is it not likely to overload the Human Rights Commission? And then, of course, the other question here, Attorney General, but I wasn't really clear on that one. Maybe a bit more clear on the Attorney General issue. Godi, Mike. I just need you to repeat the very last mention of on the Attorney General, and then our advocate can address that.
Thank you very much. My question, it was directed to, you said about the Registrar General.
Oh,
since some of the duties of ZEC are now being channeled to the Registrar General. And I'm asking the rationale behind the decision. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much. Over to you, Advocate.
Thank you, Mzuguru. I would address the first question, which pertains to what's in it for the public. So, yeah, like what I was saying, particularly to the issue where we are having an election cycle extended from 2028 to 2030. So basically, we are cutting on cost. Elections are costly, and they take so much from taxpayers' money. Do you know who's paying to have frequent election? It's us, the general public. When you buy a suite in Zimbabwe, you pay tax. You are an employee, you pay tax. We pay so many taxes. That money is used to then, fund election. But the idea between Amendment Bill number 3 is that we need to progress in economic terms. We need to have quality education. We need to have quality health. We need infrastructure development. So instead on focusing on elections, why don't we use that money we have budgeted for elections for something more impactful to the lives of Zimbabweans? So to answer him, I think that money, which was supposed to then be used in 2028 for election, can be then channeled to build schools, to build roads, to develop infrastructure and so on. And also, why is it important to then have 7-year term limits? It is a consistent policy formulation. So what does it mean? I'm an investor. I stay in Switzerland. I want to invest my money. I need to then know that these conditions which I've entered in agreement with the government of Zimbabwe will be consistent for the next 7 years. I'm readily going to put money in that particular country. I then also gave an example of Rwanda, where they have 7-year term limits. And according to the International Monetary Fund on its indexes, Rwanda is doing so well. Yeah, so I think us as Zimbabweans, we have more to then benefit. And also, like what I was talking about, political toxicity, rather. Yeah, we are saying elections are very emotive, they divide us. You are saying, I want political figure A and I want political figure B, So, yeah, we tend to fight. It's just a fact. It's just a historical fact. But why don't we concentrate on, bread and butter issues which affect us? So, yeah, I think there's more for the public to benefit. Yeah. And also to move on to what you were saying, to what the learned colleague of mine was saying. I think it's also important in other government departments and commissions to have technical appointments. I agree. And also to what you are saying pertaining to the Human Rights Commission, that it would be overwhelmed. I don't think so, because currently it also deals with women rights. The moment you are dealing with human rights, you cannot then separate that we will not deal with these rights, we will deal with these rights. Human rights are intertwined. They are indivisible. You cannot divide them, rather, by their inherent nature. Yes. So, yeah. And also, the other question was on the Registrar General, right? Like, what merit or what is the rationale? The rationale is such that there are requirements as to who can vote, who can legally vote in Zimbabwe. They usually pertain to your personal identification documents, right? This is your birth certificate. This is your identity card, right? So how do you qualify to be a voter in Zimbabwe? You need to be 18 years. You also need to be a citizen of Zimbabwe. And that information is held by the Registrar General. You see? So it's easier for them to then make that distinction that this person is a duly qualified person to then vote in Zimbabwe. Whereas what was happening currently, ZEC had to then go to the Registrar General and they have to make a liaison, interdepartmental setup or arrangement, which is a bit difficult, and information can be lost, duplicated, or can be incorrect. So it's better for the Registrar General then to deal with those issues. Yeah. And also to add on that, like the issue I then discussed earlier, which relates to ghost voters, the Registrar General is also responsible to issue death certificate. When you die, you get a certificate in terms of the law that this person so and so has died, okay? And that person's name must be deleted from the voters roll, you see, so that we won't have those issues. So it's easier for the Registrar General then to deal with. I think it's clear, yeah.
All right, we may have a round of applause. I hope and trust that the reactions that we raised were adequately addressed. So we'll take three more. We'll take three more questions, Chitora, in numbers of 3, and then you can be able to address them as well. All right, any takers? All right, maybe one watching Bofunga. I had the chance to attend the same workshop with you recently, where Honorable Jobo was addressing these same issues we are talking about. I think that was last month. You posed the question to him, which I did not quite get the response to. I hope and trust now, by now, maybe you have looked into it briefly. Where you then questioned, you said in the United Kingdom, they are using more or less a similar system with South Africa, except that the difference is in United Kingdom, if I got you right, the elected parliamentarians then have to vote amongst themselves to say we are going to have so, which is the system that is used to vote in mayors locally as well as my council chairpersons, if I got you right, which is slightly different from South Africa. Per Cap 3 at Nayo, what is the proposal there? You seemed to highlight that there's a bit of silence on that one. Have you gotten a chance to look into it to say if we adopt this holistically as Zimbabwe, how is the president going to be voted in? By the parliament drawing from outside parliament, or are we going to have parliamentarians amongst themselves actually voting to say amongst themselves the same way mayors are chosen? What is the position there?
Thank you very much for the question. I think it's a pertinent question, but I strongly believe my interpretation might be wrong, but I'm still entitled to my own opinion. I think we in Zimbabwe, we use a constituent-based approach where the general public will vote for their respective MPs for their respective constituents. For example, you and I are from Masvingo Urban. We're going to vote for an MP, right? So for you to then qualify to be nominated for the presidential election, you need to be an elected MP, and you need to have been elected. And then when the parliament meets for its first session, it then elects the president. Unlike in South Africa, where we are saying if a political party, for example, the ANC, African National Congress, garnered 40% from the previous election to get 40% of the MPs. So it means 40% of MPs in the South African parliamentarians are from the ANC. If the economic freedom fighters got 11% of the total election, they will get 11%. And then they will eventually nominate together, they will nominate the person who must be president. Unlike where in Zimbabwe we are saying you need to be voted through a constituents-based approach. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much for that, Advocate. And I believe we've come to the close of our public lecture. May we have a round of applause for Advocate Zimbabwe?